At midnight station time, I discovered 3 apex predator cubs cowering from their own shadows. Let me back up. You need context for why this was so fundamentally wrong. I'm Bixal, station xenobiologist, and I've studied thoraxians for 15 years. Thoraxians are quadrupedal hunters with retractable claws that can shred durasteel, reflexes clocked at 3 times standard humanoid response time, and bite force that makes our safety protocols look like suggestions. Their cubs start practicing kill strikes at 6 weeks old. By 3 months, they're taking down small prey. These particular cubs were 4 months old. They should have been investigating everything, play fighting, showing that distinctive thoraxian confidence that borders on arrogance. Instead, I found them huddled in the back corner of Quarantine Bay 3, trembling at the hum of the air filtration system. How long have they been like this? I asked Kintal, our medical officer, who looked like he hadn't slept in 2 days. Since they arrived 4 days ago. He rubbed his face with both hands. We've tried everything. Standard juvenile integration protocols, specialized thoraxian comfort measures, even brought in entertainment programs designed for their developmental stage. Nothing. They won't eat, won't play, won't interact. They just shake. I watched the cubs through the observation window. The smallest one, a female with distinctive gray markings on her ears, flinched when her own tail brushed against her leg. Their physical health? I asked. Perfect. No injuries, no illnesses, no nutritional deficiencies. But Bixal, they're starving themselves. If we can't get them to eat in the next day, we'll have to force feed. And given thoraxian jaw strength, that's going to require sedation, which at their age carries significant risks. I pulled up their file on my datapad. 3 cubs from the merchant vessel Sharp Claw, refugees from a colony ship that had been attacked by raiders 6 weeks prior. Parents survived. Cubs physically unharmed but present during the entire 30-hour ordeal that killed 60% of the ship's population. Psychological trauma, I said. Obviously, Kintal replied. But we don't have thoraxian psychological specialists on station. The parents are arriving tomorrow. We just need to keep the cubs alive until then. Have you contacted the parents about their condition? They seemed unconcerned, said cubs are resilient, told us to just provide food and water. He paused. I don't think they understand the severity. I spent the next hour trying every technique in my considerable education. Played recordings of adult thoraxian vocalizations. No response. Introduced scents from their homeworld. The cubs pressed themselves flatter against the wall, dimmed the lights, brightened the lights, adjusted the temperature. Nothing. The cubs just stared at us with wide eyes, ears flat, whiskers pulled back in permanent fear displays. Velmora joined me, around hour 2. Our security chief had more experience with thoraxians than anyone on station, having served on a joint operations vessel for 3 years. This is bad, she said, watching the cubs. I've never seen young thoraxians like this. Even orphaned cubs maintain that hunting curiosity. These 3 look like they've given up entirely. Suggestions? I'm security, not psychology. But if they don't improve before the parents arrive, there's going to be a cultural incident. Thoraxians don't understand mental health the way we do. They view fear in their young as a fundamental failure of development. Meaning the parents might reject them. Thoraxian society doesn't have patience for weakness, even in traumatized children. I watched the female cub's whiskers twitch at some sound I couldn't hear, her whole body tensing in terror at nothing. That's barbaric. That's their culture, and we're bound by non-interference protocols. Velmora sighed. Keep trying. I'll delay the parents' arrival if I can. Buy you a few more hours. She left. I stayed until 400, attempting every intervention I could research. The cubs didn't improve. If anything, they seemed more withdrawn, as if all our attention was making things worse. I finally went to my quarters, slept for 3 hours, and returned at 800 to find Kintal arguing with someone outside Quarantine Bay 3. You can't just walk in there, he was saying. Those are thoraxian cubs, not station pets. I was told there were animals that needed socialization, a human voice replied, confused but firm. That's literally my job. I rounded the corner and found Kintal blocking the doorway, while a human woman in casual work clothes held a datapad and looked increasingly annoyed. What's happening? I asked. This human claims she's here about the cubs, Kintal said. The human turned to me. Hi, I'm Iris. Station administration hired me 3 weeks ago to establish a companion animal program for crew mental health. Someone sent me a message this morning about juveniles in quarantine needing socialization work. Is that not accurate? I pulled up station communications on my datapad. Sure enough, there was a general request sent at 600 asking if anyone had juvenile socialization experience. Some automated system must have flagged Iris's profile. There's been a misunderstanding, I said. These aren't companion animals. They're thoraxian cubs, sentient species, currently experiencing severe psychological trauma. We have specialists handling it. Are the specialists succeeding? Iris asked, looking past us through the observation window. Kintal and I exchanged glances. That's not the point, Kintal said. You're not qualified to. I train dogs with severe anxiety and fear-based aggression, Iris interrupted, still watching the cubs. That little one in the back, the gray-eared female? Classic fear posture. The 2 males are trying to make themselves invisible. They're not engaging with their environment at all, which means they're in constant stress response mode. They're sentient beings, I said carefully, not animals. So are humans, and we get anxiety disorders too. Iris looked at me directly. I'm not saying they're dogs. I'm saying fear is fear, and trauma is trauma, and those cubs are drowning in both. Are your specialists trained in behavioral rehabilitation? We're xenobiologists and medical professionals, Kintal said stiffly. So no. Iris turned back to the window. How long have they been like this? 4 days. And in 4 days, with all your specialists, has anything improved? The silence answered her question. Let me try, Iris said. 30 minutes. If I make things worse, I'll leave and never come back. But right now, those cubs are shutting down. And if someone doesn't help them soon, they're going to reach a point where nothing can bring them back. Absolutely not, Kintal said. The liability alone. I'll take responsibility, I heard myself say. Both of them looked at me. 30 minutes, but I'm observing the entire time. And if I see any sign of distress, you stop immediately. Kintal looked like he wanted to argue, but exhaustion won. Fine. Your responsibility, Bixall. Don't make me regret this. He stalked off. Iris smiled at me, and there was something unsettling about how calm she seemed. Thank you. I'll need you to stay in observation, not in the room. The cubs already associate your species with stress. I need to be a neutral presence. What exactly are you planning to do? Absolutely nothing, Iris said, and walked into the quarantine bay before I could ask what that meant. I rushed to the observation window. Iris had entered the bay, the door sealing behind her. The cubs' reaction was immediate. All 3 pressed themselves even flatter, the smallest one making a high-pitched distress sound. Iris didn't look at them. She walked to the center of the room, sat down on the floor with her back against the wall, and pulled out a datapad. Then she just sat there reading. 5 minutes passed. The cubs stayed frozen. Iris didn't move except to occasionally scroll on her datapad. 10 minutes. The male cub on the left, slightly larger than the others, slowly lifted his head. His ears were still flat, but his eyes tracked to Iris. 15 minutes. The gray-eared female's whiskers twitched forward just slightly, a micro-expression of curiosity breaking through the fear. 20 minutes. The third cub, a male with a distinctive stripe down his spine, shifted his weight. Just barely, just enough to change the angle of his body toward Iris. Iris still hadn't looked at them once. At 23 minutes, the striped male cub took one step forward, then another. His posture was low, cautious, every muscle ready to bolt. But he was moving toward Iris, not away. The gray-eared female followed, slower, more hesitant. The larger male brought up the rear, positioning himself between his siblings and the door. They approached Iris in painful increments, taking minutes to cross a distance that should have taken seconds. Iris kept reading her datapad, completely relaxed, her body language broadcasting absolute unconcern. When the striped male was close enough to touch her, he stopped. His nose twitched, processing her scent. His ears came partially forward. Iris finally moved. She slowly extended one hand, palm down, not reaching toward the cub, but simply making it available. The cub sniffed her fingers. His ears came fully forward. After a long moment, he pressed his head against her palm. I stood at the observation window with my mouth hanging open in a very undignified manner. The gray-eared female approached next, pushing her head under Iris's other hand. The larger male stayed slightly back, but his posture had completely changed. His tail was no longer tucked, his ears were up, and he was actually looking around the room instead of staring at nothing in frozen terror. Iris started speaking to them, too quietly for me to hear through the glass, her hands moving in slow, gentle motions through their fur. At the 30-minute mark exactly, Velmora's voice came through my comm. "Bixal, we have a problem. The Thoraxian parents are here. 6 hours early. They're demanding to see their cubs immediately." I looked through the window at Iris, who had somehow, impossibly, gotten all 3 cubs to approach her, to accept touch, to show signs of engagement with their environment for the first time in 4 days. "Stall them," I said. "I can't. They're already on their way to quarantine. You have maybe 5 minutes." I ran to the quarantine bay door and hit the comm button. "Iris, you need to leave. Now. The parents are coming and this situation is about to get very complicated." Iris looked up at me through the window, then down at the 3 cubs pressed against her sides. "No," she said simply. "This isn't a request. You're a civilian contractor. You have no authority here and—" "These cubs are finally feeling safe," Iris interrupted. "If I leave now, they'll regress. All this progress will be lost. That's not your decision to make. Someone has to make it, and you're clearly not going to." Before I could respond, the main quarantine doors opened and 2 adult Thoraxians entered, followed by Velmora, who looked deeply uncomfortable. The adult Thoraxians were massive, male and female, both easily 3 times the size of their cubs, with the glossy fur and confident bearing of healthy apex predators. They stopped at the observation window, staring at the scene inside. The male adult, who I later learned was named Ralkesh, made a sound I'd never heard before, something between a growl and a keen of distress. What is that human doing with our cubs? The female, Sindra, demanded. She's helping them, I said, trying to project confidence I didn't feel. Your cubs have been experiencing severe trauma responses since their arrival. This human has expertise in anxiety rehabilitation. As you can see, she's made significant progress. Ralkesh's ears flattened. Our cubs are being handled by an alien? A human? Your cubs wouldn't eat, wouldn't move, wouldn't interact for 4 days, Velmora said quietly. Bixal's specialist has gotten them engaged again in 30 minutes. Whatever she's doing, it's working. Sindra's tail lashed once, a sign of agitation. This is unacceptable. Retrieve our cubs immediately. We will handle their adjustment. With respect, I said, your cubs experienced significant trauma. They need specialized care. They need their parents, Ralkesh growled, not an alien teaching them weakness. He moved toward the quarantine bay door. I positioned myself in front of it, which in retrospect was possibly the stupidest thing I'd ever done. A Thoraxian adult could have gone through me like I was made of paper. But Ralkesh stopped, staring at me with those predator eyes. Those cubs are in my care, I said, and I'm not releasing them until I'm certain they'll receive appropriate treatment for their psychological condition. The tension in that hallway could have powered the station. Velmora's hand moved to her sidearm, not drawing it, but ready. The 2 Thoraxian parents radiated barely controlled aggression. Then a sound came from inside the quarantine bay, a chirping noise, high-pitched and rhythmic. We all turned to look. The gray-eared female cub was playing. Actually playing, batting at a loose piece of fabric on Iris's sleeve, her movements quick and curious, and utterly unlike the terrified creature from an hour ago. Sindra made another sound, softer this time, and I realized with shock that the adult Thoraxian female was crying. The sound of Sindra crying stopped the entire confrontation cold. I had never seen an adult Thoraxian cry. I wasn't entirely sure they could. But there she stood, this massive apex predator, making these soft, broken sounds while watching her daughter play for what must have been the first time in weeks. Ralkesh moved closer to the observation window, his aggressive posture melting into something I couldn't quite identify. His ears were forward, tail low but not tucked. He was staring at his cubs like he'd forgotten they existed as anything other than problems to solve. "How did the human do this?" he asked quietly. "I don't know," I admitted. She sat down and ignored them. Then they came to her. "Ignored them?" Sindra's ears flicked. "That's not a technique. That's neglect." "Watch," Velmora said. Inside the bay, Iris had moved slightly. The striped male cub had been leaning against her side, and when she shifted, he startled, ears flattening. But Iris didn't react to his fear. She just continued her slow, calm movements, and after a moment, the cub relaxed again. "She's teaching them that movement doesn't mean danger," I said, understanding clicking into place. Every time we approached them, we brought intensity, concern, which to traumatized cubs reads as threat. She brought nothing, just calm presence. "Our cubs shouldn't need this," Ralkesh said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Thoraxian young are resilient." "Resilient doesn't mean invulnerable," Velmora said. "They watched 60% of their colony ship die. That changes anyone." Sindra's claws extended and retracted, a nervous gesture. "We didn't know it was this severe. They told us the cubs were physically healthy. We thought once they saw us, recognized us, they would recover." "Can we enter?" Ralkesh asked. Slowly, I hit the comm button. Iris, the parents want to come in. Is that advisable? Iris looked up at the window, then at the cubs pressed against her. The larger male, who had been watching the door, tensed immediately at my voice. Not yet, she said. The cubs are just starting to feel secure. Adding 2 large thoraxians right now will overwhelm them. Give me another hour. The parents have been separated from their children for days, I said. They're not going to wait. Then the cubs will regress, and we'll be back to where we started. Iris's voice was gentle but absolutely firm. I understand the parents are anxious, but the cubs' needs come first right now. I looked at Ralkesh and Sindra, expecting rage. Instead, Sindra nodded slowly. She's right, the Thoraxian mother said. We rushed here because we thought our cubs needed us. But what they need is to feel safe. If we're too much too soon, we wait. Ralkesh finished, though his whole body radiated frustrated energy. Velmora guided the parents to a bench in the hallway. I stayed at the observation window, unable to look away from what was happening inside. Iris had produced food from somewhere. Standard juvenile Thoraxian nutrition packets, the same ones the cubs had refused for 4 days. She opened one and set it on the floor near her, then went back to her datapad. The striped male cub's nose twitched. His ears came forward. After a long moment of internal debate visible in every line of his small body, he approached the food and took a careful bite, then another. Then he was eating, not frantically but steadily, while Iris continued ignoring him. Cubs, Sindra whispered behind me. That's Shra. He hasn't eaten since the attack. The gray-eared female, watching her brother eat, crept forward and took food from the same packet. The larger male waited longer but eventually joined them. All 3 cubs eating, after 4 days of starvation, because a human dog trainer sat on the floor and ignored them. An hour passed, then 2. Iris worked through the entire time, introducing new elements so gradually I almost missed them. A toy rolled slowly across the floor. The cubs startled but watched it. When nothing bad happened, the gray-eared female investigated it. Then the striped male. Soon they were batting it between them, that same chirping play sound emerging from their throats. Kintal arrived, took one look at the scene, and said several words in his native language that I'm fairly certain were profanities. How is this possible? He asked. Human impossibility, I said, because I had no better explanation. At the 3-hour mark, Iris finally stood. The cubs immediately tensed, but she moved slowly, stretching like she had all the time in the world. She walked to the door, knocked on it, and I opened it. They're ready for their parents, she said. But the parents need to follow specific protocols. Protocols? Ralkesh stood, his size suddenly very apparent. For seeing our own cubs? Yes, Iris said, meeting his eyes without flinching. You're going to enter slowly. You're not going to approach them directly. You're going to sit on the floor and let them come to you, exactly like I did. And you're going to stay calm no matter what they do. I am calm, Ralkesh growled. No, you're tense. Your ears are back, your muscles are coiled, and you're broadcasting predator energy everywhere. Your cubs are scared of predators right now, including you. Sindra put a paw on her mate's shoulder. She's right. We need to be soft. Thoraxians aren't soft, Ralkesh said, but he was already trying to relax his posture. Then learn, Iris said simply, unless you want your cubs to keep being terrified. I watched a Thoraxian warrior, trained hunter, accomplished parent, take instruction from a human half his size about how to interact with his own species. And he did it, because even through his pride, he could see his cubs playing in that quarantine bay. Iris led the parents inside. The cubs stopped playing immediately, all three freezing in fear postures. My heart sank, but Iris had anticipated this. She sat down exactly where she'd been before, and after a moment, Sindra and Ralkesh sat on either side of her. The cubs stared at this strange arrangement, their terrifying parents flanking the safe human. "Don't look at them," Iris murmured. "Talk to me about something boring, weather, station regulations, anything that has no emotional weight." Sindra started describing the journey from their temporary housing to the station in excruciating detail. Her voice was soft, rhythmic, completely unthreatening. Ralkesh joined in, talking about fuel efficiency and docking procedures. The cubs watched, waited. The larger male, who Sindra quietly identified as Pip, took one step toward the group, then another. He approached Iris first, pressing against her side as he'd done before. But this time, he was only inches from his father. Ralkesh's ears trembled, but he kept talking about docking procedures, his voice steady. Slowly, Pip shifted until he was leaning against both Iris and his father. Ralkesh stopped talking mid-sentence. "Keep going," Iris whispered. "Stay boring." Ralkesh resumed, voice thick, describing thruster calibrations while his son pressed against his side for the first time in weeks. The gray-eared female, Tick, came next, positioning herself between Iris and Sindra. Then Shra, the striped male, completing the circle. We stood at the observation window, watching a human teach Thoraxian parents how to reunite with their traumatized cubs, and I realized our understanding of everything was about to change. "Station commander just calmed me," Velmora said quietly. "The Thoraxian ambassador is here. He wants to know why our station has defective cubs and what we're doing about it." I closed my eyes. Of course he does. The Thoraxian ambassador arrived like a natural disaster, all formal fury and cultural outrage. His name was Vormak, and he was everything Ralkesh and Sindra weren't. Where they had shown vulnerability, he radiated absolute certainty. Where they had been willing to learn, he came with answers already prepared. I met him in the station commander's office, along with Velmora and every other senior staff member who could be summoned on short notice. Kintal stood in the corner, looking like he wanted to be anywhere else. "Explain to me," Vormak said, his accent thick with barely controlled anger, "why I received reports that 3 Thoraxian cubs on this station are considered defective." "They're not defective," I said immediately. "They experienced severe trauma and are receiving appropriate care." "Trauma," Vormak's ears flattened. "Thoraxian cubs do not break from witnessing combat. We are a warrior species. Our young are bred for resilience." "They're children," I said. "Children who watched their entire world nearly end. That breaks anyone." "Then they are weak, and weakness in cubs indicates genetic failure." Vormak's tail lashed once. "I need to assess them personally. If they are truly unfit, they cannot be allowed to breed. This is our way." The casual cruelty of it hit me like a physical blow. "You're talking about culling children because they got scared." "I am talking about maintaining species integrity," Vormak corrected. "Do not apply your soft alien morality to Thoraxian matters. We have survived as apex predators for millennia because we do not coddle weakness." Velmora stepped forward. "With respect, Ambassador, these cubs have shown remarkable improvement under proper care. Perhaps you should observe them before making decisions. Very well, take me to them. We returned to the quarantine bay to find a scene that would have been touching if it weren't about to be destroyed. Iris sat on the floor with all three cubs sprawled around her in various states of relaxation. Pip was actually sleeping, his head on her lap. Tick was playing with a toy, batting it toward Shra, who pounced on it with clumsy enthusiasm. Ralkesh and Sindra sat nearby, and I could see the change in them. They were softer now, their postures more open. Sindra was talking quietly to Tick, and the cub was actually responding, ears forward, tail moving in that tentative way that suggested she was considering approaching her mother. Vormak stopped at the observation window. His reaction was immediate and visceral. "This is an abomination," he said flatly. "This is healing," I countered. "This is a human teaching thoraxian cubs to be prey animals." Vormak's claws extended. "Look at them. Docile, passive, dependent. These are not behaviors of predator species." "They're playing," Velmora said. "Young predators play. It's normal development. Not like this, not this soft, not this trusting of aliens." Vormak turned to me. "How long has the human been doing this?" 6 hours. 6 hours and she's already ruined them." He moved toward the door. "I'm removing the cubs from her influence immediately." I blocked his path again, which was becoming a very bad habit. "No. You have no authority here, xenobiologist." Actually, the station commander's voice came through the comm. "He does. I've granted Bixal full authority over this situation. The cubs remain in quarantine under his supervision until cleared for release." Vormak's ears went flat against his skull. "You're making a diplomatic incident out of 3 defective cubs." "I'm ensuring traumatized children receive proper care," the commander replied. "If that creates a diplomatic incident, so be it." The ambassador stared at the scene inside the quarantine bay for a long moment. 3 days. I will observe for 3 days. If these cubs do not show proper thoraxian behavior by then, they will be removed from this human's influence and dealt with according to our customs." "What does proper thoraxian behavior look like?" I asked. "Aggression, independence, hunting drive, courage." Vormak's tail lashed again. "Not this pathetic display of weakness." He left, radiating fury. I stood at the observation window and wondered what I'd just gotten everyone into. The next 2 days were tense. Vormak observed every session, recording everything, making notes with what I can only describe as grim satisfaction. He watched Iris work with the cubs, teaching them what she called confidence-building exercises, simple things. Walking across the room to get a treat, investigating new objects, playing with each other. To me, it looked like progress. The cubs were eating regularly now, sleeping without nightmares, engaging with their environment. Tick had even started approaching Sindra voluntarily, pressing against her mother's side the way she'd once only done with Iris. To Vormak, it looked like confirmation of every terrible thing he believed. "She's training them like pets," he said on the second day, watching Iris reward Shra for successfully climbing onto a raised platform. "Using food reinforcement to create dependency. This is not how thoraxian cubs develop strength." "How do thoraxian cubs develop strength?" I asked. "Through challenge, through conflict, through learning to face fear with aggression, not avoidance." He gestured at the cubs. "These 3 run from everything. They hide behind the human at every unexpected sound. They're being taught that fear is acceptable." "Fear is acceptable," I said. "Fear is a survival mechanism." Fear is weakness, Vormak corrected. And weakness is death in the wild. On the third day, everything changed. It started at 0900 hours with alarms in Sector 7, 2 levels below quarantine. Containment breach. Nothing major, just some research specimens that had gotten loose during a transfer. Velmora's security team responded immediately. Except the specimens weren't staying in Sector 7. They were moving through the ventilation system, and they were moving up. By 0930, sensors detected them approaching the quarantine level. By 0945, we had 4 razor lizards loose in the maintenance corridors outside Quarantine Bay 3. If you don't know what razor lizards are, be grateful. They're research animals from a high-gravity world, about the size of large dogs, with serrated scales and a tendency to attack anything that moves. Not typically lethal to adults, but definitely dangerous, especially to children. "Evacuate the bay," Velmora ordered over comms. "Get everyone to the safe room. Security is 3 minutes out." I hit the comm button for the quarantine bay. "Iris, Ralkesh, Sindra, we have dangerous animals loose in this sector. Take the cubs and move to the reinforced safe room at the back of the bay. Now." I watched through the window as Iris stood, gathering the cubs. But the cubs weren't cooperating. They'd heard something we hadn't, their superior hearing picking up sounds from the corridors. All 3 were frozen, ears flat, trembling. "They're regressing," Kintal said. "The stress is triggering their trauma response." Ralkesh tried to herd his cubs toward the safe room, but they wouldn't move. Pip actually backed away from his father, whimpering. Then the ventilation grate exploded inward, and a razor lizard dropped into the quarantine bay. The creature oriented immediately on the cubs, the smallest targets in the room. It hissed, scales flaring, and lunged. What happened next took maybe 5 seconds, but I'll remember it for the rest of my life. Pip moved first, not away, but forward, positioning himself between the razor lizard and his siblings. His fear posture vanished, replaced by something I'd never seen in him: predator focus. Tick flanked left, while Shra flanked right. All 3 cubs coordinated without making a sound, moving in perfect synchronization. The razor lizard went for Pip, the obvious target. Pip dodged, and the creature's momentum carried it directly between Tick and Shra, who struck simultaneously from both sides. Their claws, small but sharp, found the weak points between the lizard's scales. The creature shrieked and spun toward Tick. Before it could strike, Pip hit it from behind. The 3 cubs swarmed it, working together with precision that would have impressed adult hunters. But they weren't trying to kill it. They were driving it. Pushing it away from Iris, who stood frozen behind them, and toward the reinforced corner of the bay where it could be contained. Within 30 seconds, the razor lizard was cornered, the 3 cubs maintaining a perfect defensive formation between it and the humans in the room. Vormak stood at the observation window, his mouth hanging open in a very undignified manner. "That," he said slowly, "is not possible." "Why not?" I asked, unable to keep the smugness from my voice. "Juvenile thoraxians don't coordinate. They compete. Individual hunting doesn't develop until adolescence, and pack tactics don't develop until adulthood." He stared at the cubs. What I just witnessed shouldn't exist in 4-month-old cubs. Velmora's security team burst in, contained Teehee razor lizard, and swept the bay for additional threats. The cubs maintained their defensive positions the entire time, only relaxing when Iris called them back. They returned to her immediately, pressing against her legs, but their posture was completely different now. Ears up, tails high, They looked proud. Iris knelt down and hugged all three of them, whispering something I couldn't hear. Vormak continued staring through the window. "Explain this," he demanded. I didn't have an explanation, so I did what any reasonable xenobiologist would do when confronted with impossible behavior. I asked the human. Iris emerged from the quarantine bay once Velmora's team had cleared the area. The cubs stayed with their parents. All 5 Thoraxians huddled together in a way that suggested the family dynamic had fundamentally shifted in the last 10 minutes. "How did you teach them that?" Vormak demanded before I could speak. "Coordinated pack tactics in juveniles. It's impossible." "I didn't teach them anything," Iris said, checking a scratch on her arm where Pip had accidentally clipped her during the chaos. "They already knew how to work together. I just gave them a reason to." "Cubs don't have pack instincts," Vormak insisted. "Thoraxian development doesn't work that way. We're solitary hunters until adulthood." "Are you, though?" Iris looked at him with those unnervingly calm eyes. "Because what I just saw was 3 cubs who've been together since birth, who survived a traumatic event together, moving like they've been training as a unit their entire lives. That doesn't come from nowhere." "You don't understand our species," Vormak said, but his conviction was cracking. "Maybe not. But I understand fear, and I understand bonding, and I understand what happens when you give scared kids something worth protecting." Iris gestured toward the bay. "Those cubs weren't being brave for themselves. They were being brave for each other. And for me." Vormak's ears flicked in agitation. "Thoraxian courage is individual. We face threats alone, prove our worth through personal strength. What those cubs displayed was collective behavior, inferior tactics." "Really?" Velmora spoke up. "Because from where I stood, 3 4-month-old cubs just took down a razor lizard that usually requires 2 armed security officers to contain, using teamwork. If that's inferior tactics, I'd love to see what you consider superior." "It's unnatural," Vormak said, but he was watching the cubs through the observation window with something that looked uncomfortably like wonder. Inside the bay, Pip was demonstrating to his father how they'd flanked the razor lizard. The cubs' movements were confident now, his earlier terror completely gone. Tik and Shra joined in, recreating the attack pattern, while Ralkesh and Sindra watched with what I can only describe as stunned pride. "Ambassador," I said carefully, "what if your understanding of Thoraxian development is incomplete? We've studied our own species for thousands of years. And in those thousands of years, have you ever tried raising cubs who'd experienced severe trauma? Have you ever observed what happens when cubs bond with each other as a primary survival strategy rather than competing for parental attention?" Vormak's tail went very still, which I'd learned meant a Thoraxian was thinking hard. "Our cubs are typically raised in competition. Each must prove themselves superior to their siblings to earn full parental investment. The weak are left to develop on their own, or not at all." "What if that's not the only way?" Iris asked. "What if trauma forced these 3 to develop differently, and what came out is actually better?" "Better," Vormak repeated flatly. "You're saying our entire child-rearing philosophy is wrong." "I'm saying maybe it's incomplete," Iris said. "Look at them. They're not weak. They're not broken. They're just strong in a way you didn't expect." We stood in silence, watching the cubs play fight with each other while their parents observed. The fighting wasn't competitive anymore. It was cooperative, each cub taking turns practicing moves while the others helped. Kintal cleared his throat. "I've been reviewing the bay's medical scanners. The cubs' stress hormones during the attack were elevated but controlled. Their coordination required significant prefrontal cortex activity, the kind we don't usually see developed in juveniles. Somehow, the trauma and their bonding with each other accelerated certain neural pathways. They grew up faster, I said, understanding clicking into place. Not physically, but psychologically. They had to survive. And because they had each other, they developed collective intelligence instead of individual aggression. This is speculation, Vormak said, but his heart wasn't in it. Then let's test it, Iris suggested. Give me another week. Let me keep working with them, but this time, let's document everything properly. Neural scans, behavioral analysis, the works. If I'm wrong and they're defective, you'll have proof. If I'm right and they're just different, you'll have proof of that too. Vormak looked at her for a long moment. And if you're right? If these cubs represent a new developmental pathway? What then? Then maybe you stop culling the scared ones, Iris said quietly, and start asking why they're scared and what they might become if someone helps them. The ambassador's claws extended and retracted several times. Finally, he nodded once. 1 week, full documentation. But I want other thoraxian specialists involved. If this is real, it needs to be verified by our own people. Agreed, I said. The week that followed was intense. Specialists arrived from 3 thoraxian worlds, all skeptical, all expecting to prove the cubs were anomalies. Instead, they watched Pip, Tick, and Shra demonstrate abilities that shouldn't exist in juveniles. The cubs tracked multiple targets simultaneously. They developed complex strategies for solving problems. They showed empathy for each other that adult thoraxians rarely displayed. And they did it all while maintaining the playful, curious behavior of healthy young animals. By day 5, the specialists were arguing among themselves about whether they'd been teaching cubs wrong for millennia. By day 6, they were asking Iris to consult on a complete redesign of thoraxian youth development programs. On day 8, Ralkesh and Sindra officially requested to take their cubs home. But this time, they asked Iris to teach them her methods first. I found her in the quarantine bay on the final day, saying goodbye to the cubs. All 3 were pressed against her, chirping softly, clearly understanding she was leaving. You changed everything, I told her. The thoraxians are establishing new protocols for traumatized cubs. They're training specialists in bonding-based development. They're even talking about reducing sibling competition in standard rearing. This is going to affect their entire species. I just sat on a floor, Iris said, scratching behind Tick's ears. The cubs did all the hard work. You saw something everyone else missed. I saw scared kids who needed someone to believe they weren't broken. She looked up at me. It's not that complicated, Bixal. Fear doesn't mean failure. Sometimes it means you're smart enough to recognize danger. The trick is teaching them they're strong enough to face it anyway. The cubs left with their parents that afternoon. Pip held his head high. Tick walked between her parents with confidence, and Shra only looked back 3 times. Progress, Iris assured me, from the cubs who'd been too terrified to move a week ago. Vormak stayed an extra day to finalize the new protocols. Before he left, he approached me in the observation deck. The human, he said. Iris. She was right and I was wrong. That doesn't happen often. What will you do with what you've learned? Change, adapt, survive. The same things thoraxians have always done, just in a new direction. His ears flicked and what I'd learned was amusement. We thought strength meant standing alone. Perhaps it also means standing together. After he left, I went looking for Iris. Found her in Sector 9, working with a crew, member's pet Glix that had apparently eaten 3 chairs and was working on a 4th. "How's the universe changing going?" she asked, not looking up from where she was teaching the Glix to target train with a food reward. "The Thoraxians are sending you a formal commendation. Something about being an honorary pack leader." "That's nice," Iris said, finally getting the Glix to touch a target stick without trying to eat it. "Good boy, Squish. See? Not that hard." "The Cubs call you every day," I added. "Velmora said they request video calls specifically to show you their progress." "They're doing great. Very brave. Pip's even starting to play hunt with his father." Iris smiled. "They're going to be fine. Because of you. Because of them," she corrected. "I just gave them space to figure out they were already strong. They did the rest." I watched her work with the furniture-eating Glix, this human who'd accidentally revolutionized an entire species' understanding of child development, and thought about how often we miss the simple solutions because we're too busy looking for complex ones. 3 months later, I received a message from Ralkesh. Attached was a video of Pip, Tick, and Shra on their home world, leading a pack of other cubs in coordinated play. The caption read, "Teaching others what the human taught us. The old ways are changing. Thank you." I forwarded it to Iris. She replied with, "Nice. BTW, Squish finally stopped eating furniture. Switched to eating my shoes instead. Progress? Humans. They save the galaxy and then worry about their footwear. Some days I understand them less than ever. But I'm learning that maybe understanding isn't the point. Maybe the point is just accepting that sometimes a dog trainer knows more about raising apex predator cubs than apex predators do, and having the wisdom to sit on the floor and let the scared ones come to you. So that's how a human dog trainer accidentally reformed an entire species' approach to child-rearing colleagues. You want to know the truly absurd part? 6 months after the cubs went home, the Thoraxian High Council contacted our station. They were establishing something called cooperative development centers across their worlds, specifically for cubs who experienced trauma or showed what they used to call weakness. They wanted Iris to consult. She declined, said she had a waiting list of pets with behavioral issues and couldn't abandon her clients. The Thoraxians offered her enough credits to buy a small moon. She countered with asking if they'd be willing to fund a scholarship program for interspecies animal behavior studies instead. They agreed immediately. Last I heard, there are now 43 Thoraxian specialists training in what they call the Iris protocols. They study everything from bonding theory to confidence building to cooperative development. The cubs raised in these new programs show advanced problem-solving, higher empathy markers, and yes, superior pack-hunting coordination compared to traditionally raised juveniles. Vormak sent me a paper he published about it, 800 pages on how collective courage might be superior to individual aggression in certain contexts. He cited Iris's work exactly once, in a footnote that read, "Human dog trainer. Correct about everything. Insufferable." I still see Iris around the station, usually correcting someone's approach to their pet, or occasionally consulting when we get juvenile aliens who need specialized care. She treats galaxy-changing breakthroughs and furniture-eating glixes with exactly the same calm competence. And Pip, Tick, and Shra, they still call her every week. They're adolescents now, leading their own packs, teaching other young Thoraxians that being scared doesn't mean being broken. All because one human sat on a floor and waited for terrified cubs to remember they were brave. Sometimes I think we study humans too hard, trying to quantify their impossibilities. Maybe we should just accept that they see things we miss and trust them when they do, even when all they're doing is training dogs.